Another five-star football visitor and some early ACC basketball talk. There's a lot of stuff to get to on today's episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinals Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to thank you, as I always do, for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. On today's episode of the show, will be broken down starting with football and then transitioning over into basketball. We will begin by discussing a surprise visitor at the 502 barbecue. That is five-star tight end Duce Robinson. And then the rest of the show will be about basketball. The opening opponent for the Maui Invitational over Thanksgiving break has been announced for the Louisville Cardinals. It is the Arkansas Razorbacks. We'll give our first reaction to that news. And in the final segment, we will react to John Rothstein's ACC offseason breakdown that has the Cardinals ranked 14th out of the 15th possible spots in his preseason edition. So let's start out with football. Duce Robinson was a surprise addition to the 502 barbecue last weekend. If you paid attention to the show over the course of last week before Thursday, you heard a lot of talk about Leviticus Sua, Stanquan Clark, and most notably five-star defensive end Mateo Uagalele. Mateo did not actually end up visiting. A highly ranked five-star 2024 linebacker TJ Capers did not visit either. Adam Moore, also a member of the 2023 recruiting cycle, did not come to the program's unofficial visit weekend either. So a little bit to be bummed out about there, but hey, stuff happens. But right before the weekend, it was confirmed that there was going to be a surprise visitor. Now, according to people that were on message boards and things like that, obviously I don't have any subscriptions to like any premium sites or anything like that, like 24/7 Sports, Rivals, and those guys do great work over at their respective sites. But people kept coming to me saying there's talk of a special visitor that hasn't been announced yet that could be coming into town for the 502 barbecue. And I was like, okay, I guess we will kind of see who that is when the name gets announced. Well, we found out soon after that it was five-star tight end Duce Robinson, the number one ranked tight end in the country, the best prospect in the state of Arizona, and the 20th best prospect in the 2023 cycle, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. A star of Pinnacle High School in Phoenix, Arizona, 6'6", 225 pounds, mainly considered to be a large USC lean. Staying kind of in that southwestern area of the United States, has a lot of offers from all of the big-time programs, as you would obviously know. Georgia, USC, Texas, the list goes on. Alabama, Clemson, Florida State, LSU, Michigan State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Oregon, so on and so forth. So you get the drift here. Needless to say, Duce Robinson is an elite prospect. I want to give you a glimpse of what type of a player he is, and I saw a great write-up on the scouting report from Chris Singletary, the national recruiting expert for 24/7 Sports, back in October, compared him to Darren Waller of the of the Las Vegas Raiders. Still trying to get used to that point, and projected him as a day 2 NFL draft pick in the future. I'm going to read to you this excerpt. Starts out by saying, Checking in at 6'6" and 6'6.5", 229 pounds, Robinson more than checks the box on the height weight profile for the tight end position. With broad shoulders and a frame to add another 15 to 20 pounds, this prospect still has a good amount of growth potential in the weight and strength categories. Adding in the fact that he has over a 6'10" wingspan and 10-inch hands, you have more than the prototype body to be elite at the position. The 35-inch arms that he has gives him the advantage of a tremendous catch radius that is coupled with an impressive vertical to high point the ball in traffic and on 50-50 balls, along with having soft hands. Very smooth in his routes with the ability to drop his weight and transition in and out of breaks flashes his flexibility. He goes on to say his athleticism allows him to line up in the slot, outside, and in the core of the formation to be a constant threat against the defense and provide mismatches that can be exploited. Whether it's a cornerback, linebacker, or safety covering him, Robinson's chance to win are far greater than those of his opponent. He possesses excellent speed for a player this size, along with burst off of the line of scrimmage and acceleration once the ball is in the air to track it. The hand-eye coordination that also makes him a top baseball player with the catch in the end zone. So just goes on to say that he has the potential to be a solid blocker and set the edge in the run game. The potential is limitless with his skill set and physical capabilities. A couple things to note here in this respective recruitment. I don't think I have to go out on record and say it, but I will anyways. This is going to be a very challenging recruitment to win for the University of Louisville, as we all know. Right? I mean, you start to recruit some of these higher ranked guys. Well, hey, look, you're going to have to go up against the nation's best because you're going for the nation's best prospects in the country. So let's get that out of the way. So it will be an uphill battle, but huge to get him on campus for the visit, for an unofficial visit. Getting a prospect to come across the country to visit your program is always a plus. There is a couple notes. Number one, there has been apparently expressed interest that he wants to play both football and baseball at the next level, which could be an extremely big key in this recruitment to focus on. I'm not saying that USC and company don't have, possibilities within their baseball program. Louisville is one of the top baseball programs in the country, one of the best teams nationally, year in, year out. So, assuming that, and it seems like, from some things that I've gathered from the baseball side of things, that he's a standout in that sport as well. So you would assume that, giving the notion that Dan McDonnell would want him on the team, or believe he's good enough to play on the team, it's a good selling point for the University of Louisville because, you're starting to compete with the bigger schools, and you might be kind of ahead of the curve in terms of the NIL game, but to somewhat compensate for maybe the geographical aspect of things, to where you can't offer the proximity to home, or maybe even you can't offer like Alabama, like competing for a national championship every season. One of the benefits that you can offer that other schools can't is that top baseball program, and a program where you say, hey, look, if you come here, you can obviously play right away football wise, but hey, you're going to come in as a baseball player and probably play in at least one super regional at your time here at Louisville. And that's huge. It gives you, a lot of opportunities. You have a Hall of Fame head coach in Dan McDonnell, one of the nation's most successful programs over the past 10, 15 years or so. So that's definitely a selling point. I know that Dave Lackford of Cardinals Rivals, I believe he put in a future cast here for Louisville in this respective recruitment. And I believe it was somebody said that Jody Demling had said that the team was recruiting Duce Robinson as a wide receiver and not a tight end. And I think that could be something that is also a selling point, as some schools may see him as a tight end. Louisville is recruiting him as a wide receiver, and that could definitely pay dividends in this respective recruitment, because it says he's got the speed, he's got the quickness to be a threat outside, in the way that tight ends are playing nowadays. You have less of the traditional blocking style, catch the ball in certain aspects, now kind of falling by the wayside in favor of more athletic guys that, are more pass catchers first and then blockers second. Look at Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller, even guys like Marshawn Ford. And Marshawn Ford is something that you could point at here if you are Scott Satterfield and company and say, hey, look, Duce, we have a tight end that is reminiscent of your skill set. A guy that's maybe not necessarily has the physical abilities that Duce has, but he is, quicker. He's too quick to guard for linebackers, but he's too big to guard for defensive backs, and they are doing good jobs of exploiting those mismatches with him. Duce Robinson looks to be more of a wide receiver. I know that last year going into the season, Scott Satterfield and company wanted to be able to run Marshawn Ford a little bit more out wide. So there's a lot of possibilities here. It's going to be an interesting recruitment, one that obviously Louisville seems like they made a good impression on with the 502 barbecue event. The big thing now is probably going to be to get an official visit, set up to get him on campus and allow him to be able to come in and see the game day atmosphere and things of that nature. But you probably couldn't have asked for any better of a visit here if you were the University of Louisville. A lot of possibilities in this offense for a player of his skill set. So we will take a little bit of a step back, switch gears over into the basketball side of things, where the opponent has been determined for the Louisville Cardinals in the first round of the Maui Invitational on Thanksgiving weekend. It is Eric Musselman's Arkansas Razorbacks. We will react to that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So moving right on along into discussing the Maui Invitational opener. Obviously, it is a little bit away. We have a couple months to go. The start of the season is still a couple months away. But the opening game for the Louisville Cardinals has been announced on November 21st at 5 o'clock Eastern time. That's noon in Hawaii at the Maui Invitational in Hawaii. It will be the second game of the tournament. The Cardinals will square off with the Arkansas Razorbacks. The Razorbacks are a fantastic opponent to go up against, one of the best teams in the country. They are ranked inside the top 10 of a lot of preseason rankings so far. And in terms of, the possible competition that they have to face, it's probably one of the best opportunities that they have to go up against a top team, early on in the season. So, your first reaction here is that it's going to be extremely tough. Even if you do get past Arkansas, or even if you lose to Arkansas, you're playing one of Texas Tech or Creighton, and Creighton is a preseason top 10 team, and they have a lot of players returning. They have some transfers coming in, so that's something to look forward to. And then obviously you have a team like Texas Tech who's extremely well coached. So overall, I think that this is an instance for the Cardinals to where you're going to find out early on just exactly what this team's made of. And it's a good test early on to kind of get a measuring stick of where things are at, what the team needs to work on, things of that nature. I'm trying to look a little bit ahead to see if we have more of a schedule. I know that the schedule's kind of been revealing itself here in, here out. So we don't really have a lot to go on, but you would assume that, with Maryland coming up in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, that's a solid, contest. But this is a different type of solid. This is one of those, okay, you are going up against one of the best teams in the country. Let's see how you do. And I think that Arkansas is going to be a very, very good test, but there is an opportunity to maybe catch them in a little bit of a vulnerable state. As If you've listened to this show, you know that when we went through the coaching carousel, when we talked about Eric Musselman, one of the things that I really, really liked about the former head coach of Nevada and the current head coach in Fayetteville, Arkansas, is the fact that he does very, very well with new groups, a lot of pieces coming in and coming out every season. He does a good job of getting incoming transfers and incoming freshmen to mesh very well and replacing a lot of productivity from the year prior. He did it at Nevada. He's doing it now at Arkansas. Now, that can work a little bit maybe to the Cardinals' favor. Yes, they do have some continuity on their roster. Arkansas, on the other hand, they're replacing a lot, right? They're replacing a good amount of their, production from last season, and you're implementing some highly ranked freshmen and some transfers. So basically, they have Devontae Davis coming back, but outside of that, almost all of their other contributors that contributed in substantial fashion last year, well, they've moved on to the next level, or they've graduated, and or both. But that hasn't stopped Eric Musselman from completely rebuilding. They've got a trio of five-star freshmen, Nick Smith being the most notable one. He's going to be very, very good. You also have Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh. Ricky Council is transferring in from Wichita State. Jae'Lyn Graham transferring in from Arizona State. And then you have two players from Rhode Island, McKay and Makai Mitchell. So there's no doubt in my mind that the Arkansas Razorbacks are going to be competing for the ACC once again next season. They're probably going to be a very, very tough out in March because they play very hard. They play good defense. They do very well at running in transition. And a lot of times they're pretty good at shooting the ball from the perimeter. At least that's kind of the MO for Eric Musselman's squads. But it's going to be maybe an instance where sometimes with new groups, it takes them a little bit of time to mesh. So maybe Louisville catches them in a period where they only have a couple of games under their belts as a collective unit, and Louisville might catch them in a little bit of a vulnerable state to where they're maybe not necessarily firing on all cylinders as if they were if you were playing them in let's say late January, whenever that Big 12 SEC challenge goes along. But it's going to be a very, very tough test, and assuming that they get past, or even if they lose to the Arkansas Razorbacks, I mean, you're going up against a possible Creighton team. Creighton is very, very, very good this year. Do not let the name, Creighton, and the fact that they're not a Power 5 school take away from the fact that they are going to be very, very good. They're bringing in a Baylor Shireman, the reigning Summit League Player of the Year. Greg McDermott quite possibly has one of his best teams that he's ever had at Creighton, returning 5 of the top 7 scorers that gave Kansas a big run for their money in the round of 32 last year. And then Texas Tech, yeah, they are losing some pieces, but they're very, very well coached. I would expect this to be a team, Texas Tech is able to kind of mask over a little bit of the talent deficiency because they're very solid defensively. So regardless, you're looking at two very, very telling, but also very productive matchups right away for the Louisville Cardinals in the Maui Invitational, beginning with one of the best teams in the country in Arkansas. And then outside of that, if you do win it, or if you do lose it, you're going to possibly play a Creighton team that is veteran-led. They play very, very unselfishly. And they have a lot of veteran leadership. And then Texas Tech, defensively, they're going to cause some fits, and Louisville's offense is going to be tested early on. So very exciting for the Cardinals to be in the Maui Invitational, and obviously we will continue to talk about that as we get closer. But kind of taking a little bit of a different approach in the final segment, we're going to talk about John Rothstein's ACC offseason breakdown for collegehoopstoday.com, in which he projected the Cardinals to finish 14th out of 15th in the ACC this upcoming season. I'm going to tell you why, although that ranking may be justified, I don't think it's accurate. We're going to talk about that here in just a couple moments. If you were listening to this on certain streaming services, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you're not going to hear the audio implemented advertisements that you will if you are on certain certain streaming services. If you do happen to hear those, just take a moment to relax and prepare for the final segment. But we'll be back here in just a second. And as always, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Just a reminder, the show is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every single day. Moving right on along, as I mentioned, John Rothstein, a prominent figure in college basketball media, especially social media, with his sayings. We sleep in May and things of that nature. Yeah, he's very, very popular among the college basketball social media realm, to where, a lot of his sayings are being branded on T-shirts and things like that. But he's also very knowledgeable. That could also kind of get lost in sort of the social media brand of things that he's creating for himself, which is not a bad thing. But he's also very, very knowledgeable of the sport. Does a great job of analyzing the X's and O's, but is very familiar with a lot of the teams around the country. He released his ACC offseason breakdown that had the Cardinals 14th out of 15th, and that's one of those to where I think you can justify it, but I don't think it is accurate. And I'm going to tell you why. Let's start out by talking why it can be justified. Number one, you're coming from a team last year, the Louisville Cardinals, that were 13-19. They were 6-4 in the conference, 16-14 in the conference. They finished 11th, and it was 2 games out of last place. They were tied for 11th at 6-14 with Boston College and Pittsburgh. Georgia Tech was 5-15, NC State 4-16. So you were 2 games out of being last place in the conference. You lose some key guys. You lose Dre Davis, Noah Locke, Jared West, Mason Faulkner, Malik Williams, all are no longer a part of the team. Matt Cross as well. So some of those pieces, maybe it's a little bit of addition by subtraction in certain instances, but you still lose guys that produced for the team last season, and you didn't necessarily make a ton of additions. Yes, you bring in a guy like Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, who I am extremely high on, but he's a guy that averaged under 5 points a game last season for Tennessee, so you're banking on him making a huge jump. And then you add guys like Kamari Lands and Devin Ree, who are ranked inside of the top 100 in the 2022 recruiting class, but both are kind of seen as guys that may take into their second year to be substantial contributors, especially Devin Ree. It seems like Kamari Lands may be more of an instant impact player. So you have, 9 scholarship players, maybe 10 currently at the moment. I think it's still 9. You added the walk-on Hersey Miller. I know that there is, possible, things with the NCAA that people are having rumored to say that, maybe, planning for some scholarship reduction. Regardless, the state of the program is the fact that there are 9 scholarship players. And even if you add a guy like Fabio Basili, who is an unranked player in the 2023 class that may reclassify into 2022. It's regardless of how underrated he may be rumored to be. I don't think that the addition of his talents onto the team would change Rothstein's prediction, if at all. That would leave you 10 scholarship players. I know you like to play with a rotation of 8 and 9 at the most, but when you only have 9 scholarship players, you are really banking on a clean bill of health. And it's a new head coach who's never been a head coach before, so you don't really have a ton to go off of X's and O's wise. So combine a bad season last year with a new head coach. I can see why you would say 14 out of 15. Like I'm not mad at Rothstein for saying this. I just think it's not going to happen. I don't think they're going to end up 14th. I actually probably don't think that they end up as bad as they were last year. I think that they're probably, I think that the goal should be to make the tournament. Will they? Well, that's yet to be seen. But I think that there's a lot of talent on this team. Because first of all, you think about it, you have L. Ellis and Sidney Curry coming back for another season. I think both those guys are going to take substantial leaps. You have to factor in player development. You can say what you want about X's and O's, but Danny Manning, Nolan Smith, and Kenny Payne, in terms of the player development categories, they've all three kind of been rumored to be very, very solid in terms of that aspect of coaching. So you would have, especially with big men, so Sidney Curry and Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, who's looking to take the next step forward. Jae'Lyn Withers, there's a ton of talent there. It's about getting him back onto the right track. So you have three guys there. All are very athletic. They have their own different skill sets. And then you factor in a guy like L. Ellis. You have four really solid standout players there. You have somewhat of a unproven bench, and that's the main thing. Also, you lose Sam Williamson. I forgot to mention that. You have somewhat of an unproven bench, but there is talent. J.J. Traynor, Roosevelt Wheeler, Mike James, all guys that are looking to prove themselves. Mike James coming off of an Achilles injury, so we will see how he's able to produce this season. Roosevelt Wheeler and J.J. Traynor with another year in the collegiate weight room, strength and conditioning, things of that nature. In offseason with Kenny Payne and Danny Manning, you would have to assume that they could have some solid roles. And then Devin Ree and Kamari Lands, I've continued to only hear great things about Kamari Lands. Devin Ree is yet to be seen. I think it might take him a little bit of time to really come about and come into his own. John Rothstein had 15 impact freshmen. Kamari Lands made that list. 10 under the radar freshmen. Devin Ree was on that list. 10 impact ACC transfers. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield was on there. And 10 ACC breakout players. Louisville had L. Ellis on that list. So I think that the talent is there, and that's what I'm trying to get at. Is I think that for Louisville to have as bad of a season as they had last year, you would have to essentially assume that very little player development happens. They are as lost as they were last year on offense. They are as lost as they were last year on defense. None of the guys that come into the program are very solid, or they have some issues with injuries and stuff like that. And I just don't think that all of those things are going to happen. I look for L. Ellis and Sidney Curry to be the top two scorers on this team. I really do think that they're going to have successful seasons. You're going to have guys like Kamari Lands really come in and surprise people. Jae'Lyn Withers is going to take that next step forward. And, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, I think, is going to be a very, very solid player as well. If you can get one of J.J. Traynor and Roosevelt Wheeler and one of Devin Ree and Mike James to be a very substantial contributor as well, it's going to be a team that doesn't play a lot of guys. But they're going to be very conditioned. They're going to be playing very hard defense, good in transition, and I just think that overall this is going to be a team that, in my opinion, maybe they don't make the tournament. Maybe they go in the 500 area, because there are some variables. You are banking on a lot of player development, but I do think that this is going to be a team that, if everything clicks, who knows, because there's a ton of talent. And I regardless of what you think that their ceiling is, 14 out of 15, I would just venture to say that that's not going to be the case. I think that they're going to be, considerably higher than that. So we'll continue to talk preview as the season gets closer. Tomorrow's episode will be a little bit more about football, obviously, with the season just under a month away. But hey, that's going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here tomorrow.